Kia ora, hello, namaste, ni hao. This is Prashant and we shall be continuing with our Fortinet series of labs and discussions. This video has been created for you to understand the basics of web filtering and how to do that using Fortinet devices. This is lab 8 in the Fortinet Security Guide Operating System 6.2 series, and the details of these labs are mentioned on page 136 till 149 in the guide. The video will cover the web filtering basics and additional proxy-based web filtering features. It will assist you in better understanding the lab. The VMs you need to use for this lab are Linux, FortiManager, local FortiGate, and the local Windows. In this lab, you will configure one of the most used security profiles in FortiGate, that is the web filter. This includes configuring a FortiGuard category-based filter, applying the web filter profile on a firewall policy, testing your configuration, and basic troubleshooting. You will also apply overrides to FortiGuard website categories and perform overrides on the web filtering profile. The web filtering overrides allow you to execute different actions rather than the configured actions on the web filter security profile. Now, if you watch this video and read through the guide, it should take you approximately 25 minutes to complete the lab on your machine. Now, for those who are using the virtual system or even those who are using their home PCs, a couple of recommendations. It's essential that prior to starting the lab that you restore the original file of the local FortiGate firewall from the folder on your local Windows virtual machine desktop. The files are located at resources, initial lab environment config, and upload the file called the local initial.conf config file. Now this file will reset all firewall conditions and you will not have a problem in the network if you configure the details as per instructions. Now, while doing the lab, the local FortiGate config files are located in the resources security web filtering folder as mentioned in the lab guide. So you have to install the initial lab ones to get started. And then once it is there, your network is all functioning file on the local FortiGate. Then you start with the lab proper, and within the lab, you will have one more file or config file to upload, which will give you the correct configurations. Now, in addition, for this specific lab, you need to clear the browser history of the browser on local Windows prior to start of the lab. Now the instructions are provided in the lab instructions, and we have practiced this particular exercise several times in our class as a basic security measure. After completing this particular video and lab, you will have a good understanding of the objectives which are shown here. Basically, by demonstrating competence in understanding the inspection modes, which is an essential part of web filtering, you will be able to implement the appropriate inspection modes to support the desired security profiles. Now, slide. Basically, each inspection mode, what is an inspection mode, and each inspection mode, what it does. So we'll just discuss that quickly. So each inspection component plays a role in processing traffic on its way to its destination. Now, having control over flow-based and proxy-based mode is helpful if you want to be sure that only flow-based inspection is used and that proxy-based is not used. In most cases, a proxy-based is preferred because more security profile features and more configuration options are available. However, some implementations require all security profile scanning to use only flow-based inspection mode for highest possible throughput. Now, in these cases, you can set your FortiGate to flow-based, knowing that the proxy-based inspection will not be used. While both modes for inspection offer significant security, proxy-based mode is more thorough and than the flow-based mode. You use the flow-based mode when you need to optimize the performance. Now, before Fortinet 6.2, that is before the present version that you guys are using, inspection mode was per VDOM or per FortiGate. However, now the inspection mode is per policy based, so it's become more granular. Flow based is the default inspection mode in a policy. You can change it to proxy mode when you require. Now, inspection modes can be changed in a policy using GUI and CLI when changing from flow based to proxy based, And you can use the same thing when you are changing from proxy-based to flow-based. Earlier, this used to be possible only using CLI. So there's a major change in the version that we are using currently. Now let's try and decipher what is flow-based inspection and what are its advantages and disadvantages. Now the flow-based inspection examines the file as it passes through FortiGate without any buffering. Now as each packet arrives, it is processed and forwarded without warning for the complete file or web page. If you're familiar with the TCP flow analysis of Wireshark, then that is essentially what the flow engine sees. So if you have a look at the three-way handshake that's there on the slide, that will be very evident to you. Uh, Packets are analyzed and forwarded as they are received. Original traffic is not altered at all. Therefore, advanced features that modify content such as safe search, enforcement, etc. are not supported for flow-based inspection. Now, the advantage of flow-based mode are that the user sees a faster response time for HTTP request compared to proxy-based. There is less chance of a timeout error due to the server at the other end responding slowly. However, there are a couple of disadvantages. The first disadvantage is that a number of security features that are available in proxy-based mode are not available in the flow-based mode. Then fewer actions are available based on the categorization of the website by the FortiGuard services. And finally, flow-based inspection mode with profile-based next generation firewall mode is the default for FortiGate devices. So you need to be aware of that because you need to make some basic changes within the lab when you start the lab. Now, NGFW is next generation firewall. There is a mode which you can operate your FortiGate or individual VDOMs in the next generation NGFW policy mode. You can enable the NGFW policy mode by setting the inspection mode to flow based and setting the NGFF mode to policy based. When selecting the NGFF policy based mode, you can also select the SSL SSH inspection mode that is applied to all policies. Now I've given you an example of that on this particular slide. Please have a look. You will be using some part of this in your upcoming lab. Now let's look at what is a proxy-based inspection. First and foremost, it's a pretty thorough inspection. Now, proxy-based scanning refers to transparent proxy. It's called transparent because at the IP layer, FortiGate is not the destination address, but FortiGate does intercept the traffic. When proxy-based inspection is enabled, FortiGate buffers traffic and examines it as a whole before determining an action. Because FortiGate examines the data as a whole, it can examine more points of data than it does when using flow-based. So if you have a look at this particular the way the synchronization happens is the client moves the packets, the FortiGate intercepts them. There is a separate three-way handshake happening between the client and the FortiGate and the destination server. Now in the TCP connection, FortiGate proxy generates the sync ACK. So if you look at it, it generates the sync ACK and sends it back, completes the three-way handshake with the client before creating a second new connection to the server. So if you see, this is between the client and the FortiGate, and then you have something between the FortiGate and the destination server. The proxy analyzes the headers and may change the headers such as HTTP post and URL for web filtering. If a security profile decides to block the connection, the proxy can send a replacement message to the client. This adds latency to the overall transmission speed. It is definitely more resource intensive. It is more thorough. It does lead fewer false positive and negative results. However, be aware that this is a better way. However, it does load the firewall and the traffic latency. Now a quick look at how do you configure the inspection modes. FortiGate web filters are also security profiles. Now security profiles are customizable. You've done that in the past according to the selected inspection mode. So the first step before setting up a web filter is to configure the inspection mode. Starting with FortiOS 6.2, inspection mode is a setting that is customizable at the firewall policy level. In earlier versions, where even the last semester when we were using version 6.0, it could only be done at a firewall level. So it used to be done using CLI. Now it can be done at a policy level. So that's a very big improvement. You can configure things better and your labs will become a lot simpler, believe you me. The protocol option profile determines the protocol your security profile uses, for example, to inspect web or DNS traffic. You have to note that HTTPS inspection port numbers and other settings related to handling of SSL are defined separately in the SSL/SSH inspection profile. You have to be aware of that. Right, so 10 minutes and time for a quick knowledge check. Uh, First question, which of the following is default inspection mode? Is it proxy based, flow based with next generation firewall mode set to profile based? Think about it. And how does the NGF policy based mode differ from the profile based mode? Again, I explained that in the video. You guys can go back, but I'll give you the answer. And finally, which of the following statements about the proxy based web filter is true? It requires more resources than flow based. It transparently analyzes the TCP traffic. So if you look at this first one, it definitely is flow based with NGFW. How does the NGFW policy based mode differ from profile based mode? Well, policy based flow inspection defines URL filters directly from the firewall policy. This is the important part. You have to remember this. And which of the following statements about proxy based web filter is true? It requires more resources. It transparently analyzes the TCP. Actually, it looks true for both, but the first one is true. Right. Now, in the second part of this video, we'll just quickly look over what the web filtering basics are. And after completing this particular part in the video, you should be able to achieve the objectives that are cited here. So you should be able to describe what the web filter profiles are, how to work with web filter categories. You would be configuring a web filter override. You would be configuring custom categories, and then you will be submitting a FortiGuard rating request. This is also the basis on which your questions and your upload is based. So pay careful attention moving ahead. Well, let's first try to answer the question, why apply web filtering? Web filtering helps to control or track the websites that people in your organization visit. There are many reasons why network administrators apply web filtering, and these could be preserve employer productivity, prevent network congestion, where valuable bandwidth is used for non-business purposes. Now they had some examples of this where we did some specific things like preventing people to address Facebook or YouTube at a certain point in time. Prevent loss of exposure or confidential information. You will definitely have web filter for that. You decrease the exposure to web-based threats. If people are going to be looking at maybe some games or other stuff which is not supposed to be done, then it's a problem. Limit legal liability when employees access or download inappropriate offensive material. Big issue. If you should not be going to a pornographic site, for example. You should not be doing that during work hours, and it's illegal. Prevent copyright infringement caused by employees downloading or distributing copyrighted material. You can actually set a web filter that disallows people to do that, and prevent children from viewing inappropriate material. I mean, you can actually set up if you're giving it to maybe a group of houses and you're setting up a VDOM there with the firewall policy, you can actually set it up that if you have a kid profile, you will not be able to see a particular website. So it's important for us to understand how the web filtering activates. So this animation that's happening here will tell you that FortiGate looks for the HTTP GET request to collect the URL information and performs web filtering. So as shown in HTTP, the domain name and the URL are separate pieces. The domain name might look like this in the header. It could be acme.com, the host www.acme.com, and the URL might look like the header, that is stroke index.php, and it could have a variable login is equal to true. Now, if we filter by domain, sometimes it blocks too much. For example, the blogs on Tumblr are considered different content because of all the different authors. In that case, you can be more specific and block by the URL part, that is tumblr.com stroke hacking, for example. So that's how this particular web filtering gets activated. Now let's look at the web filter profiles, and we'll start with the flow based. This security profile is supported in both proxy and flow-based inspection modes. However, depending on the mode you select, the available settings are different. So the flow-based inspection has fewer available options. In these examples, Fortinet is set to perform flow-based inspection. Now, the FortiGuard category-based filter divides the websites based on categories and subcategories uh, by FortiGuard. In flow-based inspection, FortiGuard offers two additional next-generation firewall options. That is profile-based, which is by default. So if you look at it, these are the categories that are mentioned here. And web filters are defined as security profiles and applied to the firewall policy. So uh, you can have a policy based one, you can have a URL category, and they're defined directly under the firewall policy. So any URL category, if you look at it here, they will be defined under the under the firewall policy specifically. And other profile based options, which we'll discuss in the next few slides, include search engines. You can actually define, okay, if people going to a specific search engine, you may like to prevent that. A static URL filter, you can provide a specific URL that people would not like to go to. Rating options and proxy options. Now in this example, we'll see how the proxy-based inspection is done. FortiGate is set to perform the proxy-based inspection, which is based on category-based filters, which divide the websites based on categories and subcategories, which was earlier discussed in the previous slide. Other local options, which we'll discuss again, are search engine, static URL, rating options, proxy options. Once your web profile is configured, apply this profile to the firewall policy. So the web filtering is applied to your web traffic. It is very similar to what you've been doing in the past. First, you make a security profile, define the security profile and make it exactly what you require, and then you apply it to a firewall policy. So we've been talking about categories. So let's just check how are categories decided. Now, website categories are determined by both automatic and human methods. The FortiGuard team has automatic web crawlers that look at various aspects of the website in order to come up with a rating. Now, there are also people who examine websites and look into rating requests to determine categories. Now, you would be doing something very similar for maybe one of the tasks that I provided you. And to review the complete list of categories and subcategories, you can check on www.fortiguard.com. The web filter rating is determined by either a human rater, it could be done using text analysis, or exploitation of the web structure. Both these, all these is already available and well documented. You can have a look at that in your own time. Look, it's important for us to understand how it, however, works. Now, FortiGate queries the FortiGuard distribution network, or the FDN, or the Forti manager if it has been locally configured. If it has been configured to act as a local FortiGuard server to determine the category of a requested web page. You define the category and you look on to either FortiGuard or to your local Forti manager server. When users visit a website, FortiGate uses the FortiGuard live services to determine the category that the URL belongs to, and then takes a configured action for that category, such as allow or block. Now, using this feature, you can perform bulk URL filtering without individually defining each website. So if you had to do something on online searches, then you can perhaps make a category called search engines, and under that you can have separate subcategories like Google or Bing or DuckDuckGo or others as you desire. Now, when users visit websites, FortiGate uses the FortiGuard live service to determine that category. Now, you can enable the FortiGuard category filter on the web filter or the DNS filter profiles, which we shall look at later. Now, categories and subcategories are listed and the action to perform can be individually customized. So if you look at it here, the category actions are based here, and you can look at what are the basic actions that can be done on individual category action. Now, the actions available will depend on the mode of inspection. So if you're using proxy, you will be able to do allow, blocking, monitoring, warning, or authenticate. Likewise for the flow based, profile based. Now, flow based, when you're doing it on a policy basis, you can only use the specific policy action. The action will be defined by the firewall policy. Now, please be careful about this particular table. It's an important table for all of you to remember. Now, if you look at the warning page here, you've seen that page several times when you have been playing with any of the earlier labs. Now, this warning was earlier only available for proxy based, but starting with the Fortinet OS version 6.2, the warning action is also available now for flow based, profile based mode. Now, the warning action informs users that the requested website is not allowed by the internet policies. However, the action does give the user the option to proceed to the requested website or return to the previous website. The warning interval can be customized, so you can present this warning page at a specific time according to a configured period. Now, the authenticate action, which is another very important one, is available for flow-based, profile-based modes. This action blocks the requested websites unless the user enters a successful username and password. So you could say that, well, no one else can go to Facebook, but only the admin. For the matter me, I can go and check my Facebook profile. So that kind of a customization, if you want to give it to your CEO or to your CFO or a CIO, you can actually do that. Now, the interval of time to allow access is customizable. Users are not prompted to authenticate again if they access other websites in the same category until the timer expires. Now, choosing this action will prompt you to define user groups that will be allowed to override the block. So you will have to define the user group, you have to set the action as authenticate, and then select the user group with that specific profile. Now, an important threat feature has been introduced, and you have touched upon this in your in the security fabric lab. Now, this feature introduces the ability to dynamically import external block list from an HTTP server. So if there has been a list that has already been defined, you can import that list and place it here. Now, you can use the block list to enforce special security requirements specified by an organization. These requirements can include long-term policies to always block access to specific websites, or short-term requirements to block access to known compromised locations. Now, these blacklists are text files. They are in plain text format, where each line contains a single URL to be blocked. They can be dynamically imported, and any new changes are instantly imported by the FortiOS. Because these lists are dynamically imported, any change made to the list are instantly imported by the FortiOS using this security fabric feature. Remember, you had done the threat change there, the threat number change. It's something very related to that. Now, the FortiGuard category, this resource name will appear as a remote category in web filter. You could define a firewall IP address. This resource name will appear as an external IP. Blocklist list in DNS filter profile and as a source destination IP4 or IP6 and a proxy policy. So there are, and then of course you can always define the refresh rates. Using this setting, you can specify how often in minutes block list can be refreshed from the external source. Now, the size of the block list can be 10 MB or about 128,000 lines of text, whichever is more restrictive. Note that the DNS profile supports only IP4 addresses and will ignore IPv6 addresses. Now, this is something that is there with the Fortinet present generation, but hopefully it will change with time. Now, where can it be used? Well, Fortinet categories can be used under web profiles, remote categories, SSL inspection, under exempt from SSL. All these are under the security profiles, web categories section. The firewall IP address is all mentioned here, and the domain name or the DNS filter profile can be used as a remote category. Now, when using FortiGuard category filtering to allow a block address to a website, one option is to make a web rating override and define the website in a different category. Now, web rating are only for host names, so no URL or a wildcard characters can be used. All website category rating requests will be returned with a rating error if they are not as per your web rating override rules. Now, if you want to make an exception, for example, rather than unblock access to a potentially unwanted category, just change the website to an allowed category. The reverse can also be performed. You can block a website that belongs to maybe to an allowed category. Remember that changing categories does not automatically result in a different action for the website. This will depend on the setting within the web profile filter. So this you have to be careful because you will be using this particular feature in this lab today. Now, static URL filtering is another web filter feature. Configured URLs in the URL filter are checked against the visited site. So if you enable the web filter option here, the URL filtering has the same pattern as static. So you will have a simple a wildcard and regular expression. And when a user visits a website, FortiGate looks at the URL list for matching the entry. So in this example, the website matches the third entry. If you're trying to, search for something.com and some URL, so it's going to look from top to bottom. And here it finds this particular one. So it is going to enable this one because this is the nearest match. Now this type means that the match must be exact. There is no option for partial match with this pattern. Also, the action is set to block, wherein attempts are denied. User is given a replacement message. It could be an allow. Access is permitted. Traffic is passed to remaining operations, including FortiGuard, web filter. It's like an open thing. Monitor. Traffic is allowed, though log entries are created, also subject to other security profiles, inspections, and exempt. Allow traffic from trusted sources to bypass all security inspections. Now, there's always a possibility for error in ratings or a scenario where you simply do not agree with the rating given. Now, in that case, you can use the web portal to contact the FortiGuard team and to submit a website for a new rating or get it rated if it is not already in the database. Now, remember, we had a look at this in the previous lab as well, but this is important. Let's say your website has suddenly been marked as spam and it was hacked, and there were a botnet on it and it came under a botnet check. Now, if you need to clear it up, then you have to go back to FortiGuard and tell them, hey, this is our website, this is all good, but it takes time. So you have to be careful about when things of this nature happen. So before we close the video, time for a quick knowledge check. So which of the following is a valid action for FortiGuard web category filtering? Allow or deny? And which of the following is a valid action for static URL filtering? Exempt or warning? So rattle your brain and you should get the answer, but I'll give you the answer here. It's allow and it's exempt. So thank you for listening to this video. Use this video and now get started with your lab. It should take you about 25 minutes to finish the lab. It's a short lab and there are questions which are there which you can use, which you need to answer and upload the lab once done. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day.